want to just take a moment to introduce Marilyn Levin. Marilyn is a longtime member, presenter at AEE. She is an author. She is a speaker. She is an educator. She's an activist. Authored one of the best books, in my opinion, of its kind, Experiential Activities for a Better World. Use it all the time with groups. If you haven't seen it already, you should check it out. And I know every time I hear you talk, Marilyn, I leave with a sense of inspiration, moved to act on something. And so I'm excited to hear you speak today and fire us up a little bit about courageous compassion. Thanks for being here. I'll pass it on over to you.
Thank you so much, Dan. Dan, we're very, very lucky that AE has you in the role you have taken on now. I'm thrilled that we've gotten your skill set in the house. So very honored to be with each of you. I took a list at the folks that are attending here and just want to congratulate you. You're taking time out of your day to show up for this type of workshop. To me, that tells me you really care about the world, you care about other people. You're my kind of people, and that you probably spend a lot of time, energy, and effort making a difference in the world. So I just want to thank you right up front for that. It's not easy these days, and my hope for this webinar is to share some of the wisdom that I've gained from a variety of experiences, and hopes it can do some good for you. Take what is useful to you and throw out the rest. I will not be offended. So I want to start out with a polling question. Excuse me, I just jumped ahead. So I wanted to give you just a little bit about my background to let you know where I'm coming from. So I've spent, a couple decades in experiential education, social justice, and then in the last 5 years, I've moved into another arena that's hard to label, but words like whole system change, transformational change, consciousness, spirituality, evolution, those kinds of words apply to some of the experiences that I've been blessed to have. And I've started some gay youth groups. I started a social justice coalition. I founded a network around sufficiency. I was part of 4 years ago, an international commitment campaign to try to bring about a just, sustainable, and fulfilling future. And then the last 4 years, I've been really heavily focused on KINS Innovation Networks and Green America's Center for Sustainability Solutions, where we bring together highly collaborative people across an entire sector to change really complex, intractable problems, and with some success. So it's been a really interesting ride. And I want to tell you, it's been interesting for other reasons. Now that I've hung out with some big time luminaries like Lynn Twist, that inspired me to found Global Sufficiency Network, and Susan Davis, who's the founder of KINS Innovation Networks, I now know that Lynn Twist was inspired to form the Pachamama Alliance because of a shamanic experience in the Ecuadorian rainforest, and that Susan regularly believes in psychic people that advises her. And so I've gotten in this whole wild arena, and one of the major gifts it's had that I hope to pass on today is that I've become much more comfortable in not knowing and relaxing into the unknown so that I can have a broader perspective of wisdom. I would highly recommend that. So I want to check out polling, and thank you for everybody who's entering on the chat where you're from. I appreciate that. And I want to find out some key things about what your interest is today. We are going to cover all of this, but I could certainly emphasize one or the other if any one of these is more popular than the others. Okay, good. All right. So everybody can see this. So great. That actually confirms that I think I have a good plan for today. And I want to make sure and leave some good time for Q&A at the end. And Dan's already said we can go over with Q&A for anybody who's able to stick around for that. So here we go. So now I want one more question, and there might be just a few people. Help me with just a specific problem that you're bringing to this conversation. Is there a specific issue or problem that you are wanting to make sure that gets addressed today? You can. Okay, so we have somebody saying, I'm most interested in helping people build empathy. Okay, training facilitators to work with varying populations and be effective. Good. What ideas, tools have you found to be success to move students beyond cognitive dissonance? We want to encourage our students to be upstanders. Good, good. Okay. So we should definitely address, I'm interested in helping students re-engage when they check out. Inclusion on wilderness expeditions, especially with mostly affluent white students. We are living in such divisive environment today, need many tools to help us communicate and solve problems, and our faculty to know how to support our students better. Great, okay. So wonderful, I think we have a good plan, and I will keep these in mind as we go throughout. So with the next slide, I really want to provide a backdrop that is empowering to me and hopefully will be empowering to you. There's a lot going on and it's pretty stressful. But if we remember and understand that we're undergoing a massive transformation right now, and that while it's painful, stressful, chaotic, and harmful to many people, especially people without power, it's also revolutionizing what it means to be human. And what ultimately, in my opinion, and many of the people's opinion that I hang out with, lead us to a transformed meaning of what it means to be human and a much better time and place. And we also want to remember that it's not usually governments or wars or things like that that actually make these huge transformations for society. It's really people changing their minds, sometimes only a little bit, that actually causes these massive transformations, like when we shifted from the Middle Ages to modern times. And evolutionary people believe that we are in one of those times where we are going through a massive transformation for humanity. So keep in mind that we are going through a lot, but that we're headed in the right direction, most likely. Nobody knows for sure, but I choose to believe that. So what I want to next show you is that this going high approach, this is put on by the We Go High project, which is the project I just am launching today, and we'll tell you more about that later, is that this way of going about making global change from a place of doing it in a more compassionate, more loving way is really catching on. And on the We Go High Facebook page, I'm going to show you just a few examples of that. There's Jews and Arabs helping Syrian refugees. US and Mexican women have weaved their hair together across the border in a sign of solidarity. They're very powerful. We had veterans asking Native Americans for forgiveness for the war crimes that were committed against them. And that one definitely brought tears to my eyes. And I really like this one. This woman runs across a table of people that are being very homophobic. And rather than calling them out on it, she pays their bill and leaves them a nice note. Just another way to potentially bring about some change that doesn't bring up resistance and divisiveness. And I encourage you to go to the Facebook page when you have a chance, because there's dozens and dozens of more examples of those. So next I want to talk about, now we're under this massive transformation. So what do we do about it? How do we relate to it? And I was blessed to work for many years with Lynn Twist on the 4 Years Go project and the Pachamama Alliance, and she wrote a book called The Soul of Money. And this is the quote that really drives my life. It says, "The job of our times is to hospice the death of the old and unsustainable systems and structures with compassion and love, and to midwife the birth of the new sustainable systems and structures and new ways of being." And the reason this is so important is because people are freaked out right now. And they're freaked out because the mainstream media and most of the access that people have to information just makes things scary. The movies, the TV, the information that we mostly get in society isn't providing this backdrop that the unsustainable systems and structures that need to break down are breaking down, and that the new systems are being born. And I would encourage you, in the We Go High report that we're going to give you at the end of this, there's a lot of links to places where you can get positive news. I encourage you to get as much of that in your inbox as you can, because the new world is absolutely being born right now. So this hospice and midwifing role, what does it look like? Well, it's really about identifying the patterns that got us in trouble in the first place and unlearning those and replacing them with the new patterns that are creating the new world. And we'll talk a lot about this throughout our time together. But in remembering that we do this with every thought, every belief, every word, every action, every feeling throughout every day. And so, of course, we're going to fall short a lot, but bit by bit, we start practicing new ways of being, and it does transform our lives. And the more people that do it, it starts transforming the world, and that's already happening. And we have to bring a lot of compassion to this effort because it's not easy, because we've been conditioned our whole life to act a certain way. And when you're trying to transform how you're conditioned and behave in new ways, it takes some time, takes some effort. So have compassion. And when I was trying to think for this webinar, what was kind of the catch-all phrase that I wanted to pass on, I came up with courageous compassion. And the reason that came to me is that we really do have to be a stand, not a reactionary body, but a stand for the world that's possible, the world that we know is right by all life. But we also have to bring radical compassion to it, because this is just, we have daunting terrain, it's complex, it's ever-changing, it's confusing, and so we won't really be that successful if we get too constricted. And so that's why the courageous and the compassion together. Another reason that I really think we need to bring compassion, and this is really getting solidified recently for me, is that we're all misbehaving, right? And some more than others, but there's inconsistencies in all of our lives. And I've been really exploring, like, why are we acting so like out of alignment with what we really want? And I've come to understand that we have all been exposed to varying degrees of toxicities. The water, the air, the food, the soil, the EMFs, medications we take, chemicals, scents in the homes, things in businesses, things that are being put out by the government in businesses, and toxic energies, on and on and on. And that I've just started reading a book called Wired for Healing, and it talks about limbic brain impacts. And I really realize now that a lot of us are running around with traumas, whether it's from social trauma or from these toxicities, and it's really impacting our ability to cope and respond. And I know this personally because I'm one of the canaries in the coal mine. I'm a highly sensitive, highly empathic person, and in talking to a lot of people like me over the last 5 years, we're experiencing a lot of physical symptoms, a lot of emotional symptoms, and we're kind of letting others know that this is happening, and we need to make some changes so that we can have it not happen more fully for other people. So in addition to that, we're learning a lot of things. Quantum physics is explaining really why we are all in this together. Like, whether we want to realize it or not, or believe it or not, we are interconnected completely. We pass on generational trauma, we pass on social trauma. We're learning now through epigenetics and brain plasticity that the neural pathways that we develop out of trauma don't work well for us and cause us to behave certain ways. And we're learning ways to reverse that and develop new neural pathways. So I think it really can help, at least it really helps me to understand people that are just acting in ways in the world that used to make me just going crazy. I now can be more grounded and going, okay, I have at least some understanding as to why they're acting this way. And it gives me a little bit of space and a little bit of compassion so that I can make a choice about how I really want to react to it, rather than just always being caught in reactivity. And so extricating ourselves from this cultural conditioning and these cultural impacts is really essential. And so the next thing I'm going to do is to take us through some of my favorite activities. I'm only going to do a few in honor of time, but just know that you're going to get the slide, but you're also going to get the report that has these activities and several more fully written up so that you can use them with others. So this activity I have a prop with, and I'm sorry you don't have the prop, but it's very easy to make. You just get a piece of string and tie a washer on it. You want about a foot-long string. And then you want to have people hold the string as still as humanly possible and hold it right about eye length, the hand being about eye length. And you want to still the washer. And then you ask people, with holding their hand as still as humanly possible, they want to see if they can get the washer to move side to side, just by simply with their intention and their thought. And if they have trouble, you can tell them to put aside distractions. And you'll find that when you look around the room, the vast majority of people are able to do this pretty quickly. And when that happens, then you say, still the washer, and let people know to stay at whatever stage they're at, because the few people that are not yet able to do it, you don't want them to make them feel wrong. Then you still the washer again, and you say, see if you can get the washer to move front to back. Now, I can move it pretty quickly because it's something I've done a lot, but it'll take your audiences and your groups a little bit longer. And then when you do that, you have them still the washer and say, okay, ready for the next challenge? See if you can get the washer to move clockwise. Obviously, giving more time. Then while you're doing that, say the last challenge is see if you can get, without touching the washer, get it to reverse direction and go counterclockwise. And I end this activity with saying, so this activity is a reminder that we all have amazing capacities that we're not present to. Because most of the people that you would work with, if you asked them if they could do all that before they did it, would say, no, I don't think I can move a washer like that with my mind. And in fact, we can. And when we're cutting at the misbehavior of ourselves and others in society, if we can step back and remind ourselves and others, hey, we've got amazing capacity, we just don't know we have. Let's just stop for a minute and just like own that. You know, that this seems intractable, this seems insolvable, but it's not, okay? And I also remind people when I'm doing this activity that it's really the cultural conditioning and the cultural toxicities, not personal failing, that is having us fall short of this amazing capacity as a human community. Because, you know, the shame and the blame and the calling people out, it's not working, you know, and I've learned a lot in my personal life trying to do that. And yeah, I see it in society. And so, you know, my quest is what will work. Okay, so the next cultural conditioning piece that I'm going to go through, which is another really simple activity, and you'll see you can do this with one other person. It doesn't even have to be a group. The activity I just did and this one. So with this, you just clasp your hands together like this with your fingers interwoven and relax. And now you ask the participants or the participants to just shout out how that feels for them. Most people will say things like comfortable or relaxed or normal. You might get a few people saying something other than that, but that's the general response. And then you say, okay, now put your opposite thumb on top, switch your thumbs, and then relace your fingers. And now ask people to respond to how this feels. And you'll get mostly negative response, like weird, icky, like, oh, you know. And then you just frame the activity of saying that, well, this activity is just a reminder that in our culture, we've been taught to have a negative emotional reaction to things that we're unfamiliar to. And we don't need to see a therapist or anything about this, but it's good to know. It's good to know that when something new is presented to us or something unusual is presented to us, we're going to often have a knee-jerk negative reaction. And it's really great to be thoughtful and just hang with it to decide if you like something or not, rather than just being reactionary. Okay, another activity I like using a lot, can be just one person or an entire group, is the emotional bruise activity. So this one, I want you to take your finger and find a spot on your arm that has no bruises or scrapes or anything wrong with it. And poke around, poke really hard, okay? And I don't know about you, but for me, I like this. It feels like a nice little massage. I kind of like it. Okay, now, pull your finger away and imagine you had fallen on your bike. And not only do you have road rash, but you have a deep bruise underneath the road rash. Now try to push on it. You realize that even with a very light push, not a push as hard as you did before, but a very light push, you would react and go, ow, and not want that to happen. And I like this activity because it reminds us that we all have emotional bruises. And the more that we can identify and heal and clean up these bruises, the more easily we can navigate through society with all the things that happen without getting triggered. And it reminds us that, you know, everybody around us is running around with all kinds of hidden trauma and hidden bruises. And when we say that thing or do that thing and they go off on us, we don't know why. This is why. And then we can go, every time somebody reacts a crazy way that we think they shouldn't, we can go, okay, they have a wound there. They have a trauma there. And that allows us some space to be able to react to it differently instead of getting caught up still in the back and forth divisiveness and the back and forth fighting. I also like to talk when I'm doing this activity about emotional control and emotional flow. In our society, we've been culturally conditioned to have control, and that has its place. But we also need to learn emotional flow because that's where the healing comes from. You want to be able to allow emotions in the right time and place to be able to come through you and flow out you and be released so that you can heal from them, because if they're all always trapped in you, you just carry them around like baggage and you end up with lots of these wounds where you're easy to get triggered. So the more you clean things up, the more you can navigate society. And I'll give you a few examples in my life. Recently, my dad announced that he was at 75 becoming a Catholic. And we were Baptist, so it was a change for him. And he said, well, I'm going to go meet some of the important people soon. And I was like, oh, can I come with you? And he hesitated and he said, well, and I said, oh, probably not the best idea for you to take your lesbian daughter to go meet with the important Catholic people. And so it showed that I had a place of healing because I didn't react like, oh, my dad doesn't love me, doesn't support me. I knew my dad. And it's actually a wonderful thing that he's becoming a Catholic because he is trying to heal a wound he's had since age 4 when he was given away to the nuns. And so it doesn't mean anything that my dad doesn't support me. And I'm not confused about that. So I was like, okay, yeah, well, if you graduate from being a Catholic, because you have to go through all this stuff, I would love to be there to celebrate with you. And I didn't make it mean anything. So that's an example of how I've healed a wound in me that allowed me to navigate something that in the past would have been very hurtful. Another story that I like to tell is that in a workshop once I had someone come up afterwards and tell me that she really, really wanted to talk to me about saving my soul so I wouldn't go to hell. And because I was giving a workshop on gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgender people. And rather than being angry or upset with her, I said, well, thank you. I said, I really appreciate it because, you must love me if you want me to go to heaven. And from your belief system, you see that as the only way I can go to heaven. And so thank you. I don't share that belief, and I have a great relationship with God. And so I know I'm going to heaven. So thank you very much. So another way that as you heal yourself, and this also when you're working with other people, whether it's your family, your friends, your students, your coworkers, the more you can support them in identifying and healing the wounds that they have, the more they're empowered they can be to navigate these divisive times. The last story I'll tell is kind of the flip. And with my brother, my older brother, I'm a 5th generation Texan, so that partially explains it. But he would, at family gatherings, almost always like to tell racist, sexist, classist stories just to get me going. And it worked. It worked well. It would get me going a lot. And I tried a lot of different approaches, and none of them worked. And finally, I had this big aha. And I started thinking, why does he do that? And I realized that over the years, in my attempts to try to inspire people, I've really just been judgmental and pissed people off a lot of times because of the righteous energy I brought to it. And so I went to my brother and I said, Mark, I want to tell you I'm sorry. I realize now that one of the reasons why you say those things is because I act like my viewpoint of the world is the right one. And that if you don't act like I think you should act, if you don't talk like I think you should talk, then I think less of you and I demean you. And so I want to apologize for that and own that. And you know what? He stopped. Now he's not perfect. Every once in a while, he still slips up, but predominantly he stopped. And that's, the kind of thing I'm talking about as far as the compassion, because when I was stuck in, oh, well, he's just doing it wrong and he's hurting me. And I flipped to the other side and said, okay, why is he doing this? What am I doing to make him mad that he wants to hit back? I figured it out. It really was a breakthrough. Okay. So when I get triggered, I ask, how am I like that? And how do I do that? Sort of, because it's always a mirror. When there's a trigger for you, it's always a mirror that has something to teach you. Okay. So I think I just slipped ahead. No, I didn't. Okay. So now I want to talk about some shifts to undertake. And a lot of the shifts that I'm going to go over now have to do with the blessing of being able to work in this whole system change, global change kind of arena. So I hope they're useful to you. Because things are complex and things are changing rapidly. I had a futurist recently at a conference tell us that strategic planning is done. Basically, because things are changing so rapidly that you really have to be able to continually adapt and use your intuition in order to navigate the changes, because they're happening so fast and so powerfully. So while you're learning to navigate the shifts that I've already talked about and the shifts that I'm going to continue to talk about, I'd encourage you to do a few things. One, trust in a positive outcome in spite of what it seems like you should trust in. This was hard for me because as an activist, as an empath, you know, it was like the only logical response is to be in panic, you know, and to stand up to everything and against everything, you know, and to be brokenhearted. You know, I really, you know, lived in that world for a while, but all that did was deplete me significantly and did not bring about the changes that I wanted. And I really learned that fear is not our friend, and that just trusting that things will work out provides the grounding and the centeredness that you need to be able to respond thoughtfully to what's happening. And then, yeah, it may not work out. And if it doesn't work out, then you'll deal with it. But living in fear, it just isn't working. The other thing, and I mentioned this already a little bit, is just really work on your intuitive awareness, your inner wisdom, your innate ability to discern, because it's confusing. Fake news, you know, just all the different worldviews, everything from the, you know, right perspective to the left perspective, to the right conspiracy perspective, to the left conspiracy perspective, to the evolutionary perspective. You know, I'm present to so many different worldviews now. For a while, my head was spinning. And now I'm just in the space of, I'm really grateful for all those views. And I'm getting more and more comfortable just being in the unknown. And knowing that wisdom comes from being able to take any input and look at it from a variety of perspectives before you decide how you're going to move ahead. Also, acceptance and surrender. I also used to believe those were horrible and was wrong and bad. And now I realize you can't live without them. They're so important. Acceptance and surrender is like being the strong tree that in a storm, in a category 5 storm, is the one that survives because it's flexible and pliable and can move with the different factors, rather than being the rigid tree that doesn't make it through the storm. And acceptance allows you to say, okay, I accept anything that's happening, whether it's in me or externally. And from a grounded place, I can make a conscious choice about how do I want to respond to that, if I want to respond to that, rather than being in just a completely reactionary space. Because I don't know about you, but the reactionary space, I was in it a lot, and it wore me out and made me sick. And I just recently found this quote from Deepak Chopra that I love just so much, that I think I'm only beginning to understand, but it really speaks to me. Fighting in the darkness ensnares us in the eternal battle. Transcending it, the battle is the only way forward. That I'm going to be thinking on as we move ahead, because I think there's deep wisdom there. Okay, so another Deepak Chopra. Okay, so I quoted him twice. I'm kind of fine to him. You know, we talk about self-care a lot, but we really have difficulty doing it. I know that until I crashed and burned in 2012, I talked about it a lot, but I didn't do it. And now for the last 5 years, I've been doing it, and I like it. I sleep 9 hours a night. I work about 35 hours a week. I, eat super healthy. All that stuff really matters. And if you're not able to figure out a life that allows you to care for yourself, I strongly encourage you to do so. Because, frankly, if you're frazzled, stressed, exhausted, spent, you're not in a good place to navigate these times. And we need you. And, you really can't give away something you don't have. If you don't have well-being, if you don't have equanimity, if you don't have compassion, you really don't have it to give. And so really healing your own heart is the single most important thing you can do to change the world. So I highly encourage, if you haven't made those changes, make that number one. Start there. So I want to talk about the perspective activity. Really, one of the shifts that I think is being called for in society right now to navigate these times is to shift out of a specialized, fragmented view. You know, I used to be in the progressive, activist, social justice view. I knew I was right, and I wanted everybody to believe like I did. And now I've gone to an integrative whole system view to know that I still value those values that I valued then, but yet I'm making more space to not know, and to realize I was wrong about some things, and to realize that my approach wasn't working maybe as well as I thought it was working, and to really be open to experimenting and trying some other things. So with this activity, this is another one you can use with one person or 1,000 people. So what you want to do is you want to point your finger up to the ceiling. And usually, I'm not going to point it all the way up so you can see me, but I usually have people start all the way up. Well, I'll do that. So go ahead and point your finger, like your number one, point it all the way up to the ceiling, and draw a clockwise circle, and look up at it and see that it's a clockwise circle. Now slowly, while keeping your finger pointed up to the ceiling, bring it down. You want a finger still pointed up to the ceiling. You want to keep bringing it down. You want to bring it down all the way to your belly button, and then look down at it and see which direction it's going. Now, when you do this with the audience, it's great because people are doing it over and over again and gasping because they see that it's changed directions. And really, what I tell people is that it didn't change directions. What happened is your perspective on it changed. Your fingers stayed the same and your perspective changed. And there is really no thing that is true free of who is observing that. There's no reality free of who is observing the reality. And Deepak Chopra again tells a story about if you hold a rose up, human beings with sight can see the color and texture, and that's the reality of the flower for them. But if a bat goes by and experiences that flower, they experience it as echoes of ultrasound. If a bee goes by the flower, they experience it as ultraviolet wavelengths of light. So which is true? All of the above and many more. So if we can relax into that we need to embrace a whole system worldview instead of a narrow worldview, we can start making a lot more progress in some of the divisiveness and some of the problems that we have in society. Remember that I can say it's going clockwise and at the same time validate for you that it's going counterclockwise. And we're not in contradiction. And that's something that's hard to hold. So I can say somebody who is against some of the things that I believe very strongly in, that they're right from their point of view, from their worldview, from where they live, they are correct. And from where I live, I'm correct. And just that act relaxes the field enough sometimes to have a little bitty opening that you can maybe do something with. So I believe, I went to the Quest for Global Healing Conference in Bali, Indonesia, and one of the things I learned was that humanity right now is being asked to embrace multiple, seemingly conflicting truths at once, and that humanity is developing the capacity to see the coherence and the convergence within those seemingly incoherent different viewpoints, but we just haven't developed that skill set all that well yet. Okay, I'm making sure I'm covering everything. All right. So some other shifts that I think make sense is that I've learned from this whole system perspective and the global change perspective is to really not focus on the mind. Our minds are very developed, overdeveloped, I think, for most of us. And we really want to embrace more of the body, the spirit, the intuition, wisdom. That really helps. I feel like I've covered resistance and acceptance. And I think I've covered the mind from the whole. The next one I want to do is I want to describe an activity. It's a two-person activity, so I'm not going to do it. But oh my God, these two activities I'm going to do next are just awesome. And you have to have at least two people, but you can do it with 2 people or 1,000. And these are in your guide. So when I want to talk about competition or getting hooked up with people in negative ways, I do the thumb wrestling activity. And there are other ways to do it if you've already done the thumb wrestling activity. There's other ways to do it, and I think that's in the report, and if not, it's in my book. To still, make the point, even if people have already done the thumb wrestling activity. And the way this one works is that you get people to get in the thumb wrestling position, and you tell them they need to do two things. One is how to score a point, and that is to gently pin the other person's thumb down. And you make a joke about no hair pulling, no biting, no smackdown. And then the next thing they need to know is the object of the activity is for everyone to score as many points as possible. Okay, I usually repeat those two so that people are clear. And then I tell people to keep track of their individual points, and then I let people play for really just a minute or two until you start seeing that some people start cooperating in scoring a whole bunch of more points. And then you end the activity, and then you ask people, raise your hand if you scored 5 or fewer points. And you'll have most people raise their hand. And then you say, raise your hand if you scored 5 to 25 points. And then you'll have some people raise their hand, and the rest of the audience will look at them like, what happened? And then you say, did anybody score more than that? And you have those people raise their hand, and there's usually fewer of those. Then I ask the people that scored the most points to stand up and visually demonstrate what they did. They do so, and they show that they allowed each other to score points, and they cooperated. And then I say, well, I set you up. I put you in a familiar competitive environment, and I gave you a cooperative goal. And this is our reminder that we are thoroughly trained in this society to be competitive, even when we will both get more of what we want if we're cooperative. Next activity that's super awesome when we're talking about criticism and judgment is the hand slap activity. And that's that one in grade school where, one person's palms are down and the other person's palms are on top. Like that, and then the person on the bottom tries to come around and slap their hands, and the person on top tries to pull away. Well, what we do is you describe that, and then you describe that we're going to add simple math, only simple addition and subtraction to that, and then we're going to see how people go. And then each person gets a chance to play each role in the pair. And so you let them play for a little while, and then you ask the question, raise your hand if you did great work while under attack. And most people don't raise their hands. There's usually one, maybe two people that do. And then you process the fact that most people do not do their best work while under attack. And we actually never have to even slap the other person. We just have to be in this game that's the setup. And then you can talk about how living in a divisive society is the setup. We all are worried about when we're going to get criticized, when we're going to get judged, when we're going to get attacked, and that anything that we can do to remove our participation in this attacking environment is really going to make a difference. And the environment we spend the most time in is internally. So removing those internal attacks is the best place to start. And the last thing I always like to mention is seriousness versus playfulness. I've always been a playful person, but I've struggled before to feel like playfulness is appropriate when so many people are suffering so extensively. But I definitely believe it is, because it allows you to do a number of things that you can't get to from seriousness. Sometimes you break the ice with playfulness. Sometimes you're just helping release the tension with playfulness, change the energy of people. Anyway, the people that do experiential education are also usually very highly playful, so I probably don't have to sell that one too hard. Okay. So the next thing I'm going to do is I am going to go over these tools, but I'm going to go over them really fast because you're going to get these slides, and I want to leave some good time for the Q&A. But really, a lot of times when people try to address hurtful remarks, we're not coming at it from compassion, and so it kind of, just getting snarky with people or just confronting people doesn't work very well. And so I'm going to hit a couple of these and then move on. I think it's important to have group agreements, but I think it's super important not to have a whole bunch of them because people then check out and don't use them. My favorite are assuming good intentions and oops and ouch. So assume good. If somebody messes up, assume they weren't trying to be a jerk. And then when they make a mistake, go ouch. And then they can notice it's an ouch and discuss it if it needs to be discussed. Or if you catch yourself doing an ouch, say oops. And then I think it makes sense to help people that are the receivers or attacks to not always even confront. Because sometimes, you know, the bullies they're going to confront aren't going to be changed, at least right now. And it's important for them to say things like, if somebody comes at them with an insult, to say, wow, you must not know me. I'm pretty amazing and pretty fabulous. And then just turn and walk away. You know, giving the skill set to the people that are being dealt with the attacks is very effective. Okay, I'm going to keep going. More using humor, but don't use put down humor. My favorite humor one is my sister. She's a flight attendant, and somebody accidentally asked her if she was pregnant one day, and rather than just calling out this guy to make him feel like a scumbag, she said, no, that's my gravy baby. And he got the message, not to do that, but he got it in a humorous but compassionate way. Also, let's see. At the end, appreciate all the progress. Sometimes it can be pretty infuriating when somebody's going from being really offensive and really divisive to appreciate it when they move ahead, even if it's small steps. But you know, it makes sense to, it works to appreciate every tiny little step. Okay, I'm going to talk about being an amazing ally. And I wish I could remember the guy that I took this picture. This is at the bottom, this is one of the AE conferences where we made hero capes and wore them around the conference. That was so much fun. The biggest point I want to make with this one is that we have to be allies to the bullied and the bully. That's one of the big things that most of us forget. When I look at my life in the ways in which I was bullied and the ways in which I was a bully because of my privilege, I have had more damage to my life in the ways of being privileged and being the oppressor and being the bully, because it's taught me to dishonor and be disconnected from and dehumanize entire segments of society and miss out on those connections and to actually tolerate what is truly intolerable to me as a good human being. And so we need to remember that we really have to address both sides of the equation to cause healing in the world. And another thing I want to point out is the victim, villain, rescuer cycle. I had a really great lesson, hard lesson, a few months ago in my workplace where I got sucked into being the rescuer in a victim, villain, rescuer circumstance. And it worked really well on me because I like being the hero. And it really learned, like, yeah, don't do that. Sometimes there does need to be a rescue, but often those of us who like to rescue dive in too quickly, and we need to learn to do other things. And so you can definitely look up the victim, villain, rescue cycle. There's a lot of stuff on the internet about that.
Marilyn, we have a couple of folks I just want to make sure you're aware that are interested in digging a little more into those past two slides.
Sure.
If you want to go back there now or just make time for that in the Q&A, I just wanted to let you know that.
What would you recommend?
I think it's just a couple more slides to more open Q&A.
Okay, yeah, let's just bring it to the Q&A. So I'll keep going and we'll bring it in the Q&A.
Great.
Okay, great. Thanks. Okay, yeah, I'm sorry. I apologize. I always bring too much to my trainings. I just love to give you so much good stuff. And just know you're not a huge crowd. So if someone wants to email me, Marilyn@marilynlevin.com afterwards for a personal follow-up, I welcome that contact. So we won't leave you high and dry. You're good people doing good work. Okay, so tools for transforming conflict. We have to relate to conflict differently so that we can extricate ourselves and transform it. And we want to treat it as an opportunity. My favorite model from that is the dog whisperer. Cesar Millan, when he's dealing with a pit bull that's attacking a poodle, and the starts going off, he doesn't freak out. He goes, "This is good." He relaxes and he says, "This is good because I cannot resolve the conflict if it is not present." And then he goes to work at identifying what's happening and what needs to be done. So you can train yourself to react to conflict from a very positive space, and to teach people to react to conflict from a positive space, and to reframe the conflict as win-win situations. You know, one of the conflict mediation things always takes people when they're in conflict and says, okay, both of you stand over here and look at the conflict together to see if from that perspective you can see it differently. And you want to really know your default reactions to conflict so you can practice new approaches that are effective. And remember, The breakdowns are the access to the breakthroughs. So always welcome the breakthroughs. Okay. When in conflict, you know, it can be really helpful to just acknowledge the despair and hopelessness, or the frustration or the sadness or whatever emotion is behind both parties, because then that can be a commonality to start from. You also want to have people focus on the energy. Like, I know for me in particular, I have very strong energy. People, when I used to be less healthy, people would just lean back in my presence. So even if somebody's saying the right thing and saying it in the right tone, they can still get a negative reaction if they're bringing a negative energy. So that's a good part to remember. All right. And again, use avoidance strategically. People like me often feel like, oh, we have to get in there and we have to fight every fight. And no, you don't. Sometimes it's best just to walk away and let it go. Okay, so resources. The WeGoHighProject.com. Basically, this is the We Go High Project. I'm launching it today. You are a part of it. And I'm going to ask you a favor on the next slide. And it's a innovation network and resource place for people that want to try to figure out how to go high to making the world a better place. And we're very excited about it. And if you go to the website, you can sign in up and download the resource guide. And hopefully that you are able to do that, send other people. We'd love to people to have that guide. It has all the activities I've done today plus more, plus a bunch of links to some amazing organizations and some guidance, some of which is similar to what I've shared today and some of new. And again, my book, if you want something even more extensively, it's in Spanish and English now, thanks to Mache Trevino, one of my AE colleagues. And next slide. So we are launching today, woohoo! And we could use your help. We need as many people as possible to spread, not just like. We love you to like us, but right now what we're trying to do is spread this meme. And it's about Michelle Obama and Ellen DeGeneres, and they inspired We Go High, among other things. And we've created this meme that we hope could go, at least trend, or go viral is the dream, but we know how hard that is. And if you can do this on today or tomorrow, that would be very helpful. And right now, my wife is posting the link, and what we'd really like you to do is to go to this link and share from Facebook, because that's going to help us the most. And then invite all your networks to share too. So that is something I hope you have time for, and if you don't, love you anyway. So it is now time for Q&A. So let's open to that.
Maybe it'd be helpful if you go ahead and go back to the slides on handling hurtful remarks.
Okay, great. Okay.
And then we're waiting for folks to type in questions, and I'm sure they're coming. There's one that I've dealt with recently. I know of an organization whose staff have sort of petitioned the administrators of the organization to take a public stance on our current administration. You know, essentially saying we don't support this president. And you know, you kind of know where staff are coming from with a lot of their sort of ideals, and you also may understand where an administration is coming from in terms of, well, we don't want to shut out a lot of potential business. But I'm curious your thoughts on addressing that from either side of the equation.
Well, yeah, I think it's an excellent question, because being against, I think, is less powerful than being for. And so I think it's right for some organizations, some people, some entities, some groups to fight the fight. I'm not saying that's wrong. But I do think that it is appropriate if more and more of us can model not fighting the fight, not being in the victim, villain, rescuer. So if I was in that administration, if they were comfortable doing that, then go for it. But I would do it from a high place. I would do it without making snarky remarks against Trump, without calling him names, without making him evil, because we're like, that's just not. You cannot be the change you wish to see, want acceptance and love and compassion, and then be snarky and negative and call people names. It's just contradictory. But if the administration really didn't feel comfortable with that, I would have a conversation and try to get a facilitator that had a skill set like mine that was in the area to have a conversation saying, you know what, we get it, we really get it, but you know what we want to do is we want to try to go high. We want to try to model, you know, not fighting against him because he loves attention. And that's not the only way to make a difference. You know, that the new world is being born out there. I can't even tell you how powerfully it is. If you're not present to it, go to the resource guide and start following. And if you focus on building the new world and allowing the world that's breaking down to continue to break down and not fighting it with nastiness, you'll find that your world is more at peace. And I think that makes some difference.
That's a great answer. Thanks, Marilyn. We have a question here from Katie over at Knowles.
Okay, yeah. It says aim for results. Yeah, that's a great one, because when we're triggered and when we're passionate and we want to deal with something, we usually just go with what comes to us. Freedom of expression. And we value freedom of expression. But you know what? That's usually not what works. And so you want to coach people, coach yourself and coach other people to say, okay, do you want freedom of expression or do you want results? You usually can't have both. And I would encourage people to come for results, because then you say, rather than saying what I need to say, you think, all right, what's going to work with this person? What's going to create the breakthrough? What's going to create the opening? And usually it's something that's coming from compassion about their worldview. I recently, I forget where I got it, but I wrote it down because I wanted to make sure I said it. It's about de-escalating conflicts. Learning to say to somebody you're in conflict with, or somebody's really upset, saying, so help me understand. Help me understand how you see this. Help me understand why you care about this so much. Help me understand what's so important to you. Help me understand is an opening and bridging conversation. So any more questions? Purple test. Oh, okay. Yeah, some of these aren't that excellent. Okay. I used to rescue, when I worked with gay and lesbian youth, I used to rescue them too quickly. And rather than teaching them to not let the demeaning remarks get to them. And so I developed the purple test. And if somebody would come to me and said, well, they said I was stupid. They said I was a loser. They said I was whatever. And I'd say, well, what if they called you purple? Would that piss you off? And they'd say, no, I'm not purple. And I said, well, you're not stupid either. And to learn to own, like, don't own that stuff. That negative, snarky stuff that's coming at you, don't own it.
Marilyn, we'll see if some more questions roll in. I know, since I don't see him, I'm going to take advantage of the time and ask another one myself.
Okay.
When you're working at a place where it's not really part of the mission, you know, to teach values, principles, you know, maybe it's just your job to run this activity and not even do a big debrief, or, you know, teach this lesson and get the homework and move on.
Yep.
So there might be some fear about whether you should engage when you hear those kind of comments that might trigger you or someone else in that setting, versus just kind of putting your head down and doing what you're there to do. Yeah.
Well, number one, if you're in a situation where you can't do that without losing your job, don't feel bad for not doing it. You know, we all have to work, you know, and, you know, there are times and places we can take a stand and times and places we can't. And, you know, I think having group agreements about the learning space would be something that would be safe for most people. And so even if you use we're going to assume good intentions of each other, and we're going to say oops and ouch when things go off, may give you the space to then say, okay, let's stop for a minute. The learning space is not conducive to learning. And so let's just address something and we'll go right back to learning. You know, that would be maybe the best way, whether you're on a ropes course or whether you're in a classroom, you know, or the workspace, you know, either the workspace or the learning space. Is it conducive to the work at hand? And so, and what I would say is, especially if this stuff is really new to you, practice on friends and family first. So that you can get more facile with it before you bring it to the students or your workplace. That would be a good first step. Okay, so let's see. How do you square with the desire not to put the oppressed person in a position of being responsible for stopping the bullying? Well, you know, it's tricky. I've tried to hold oppressed people responsible for many years. And the only time I've been effective is when I've brought a tremendous amount of compassion to them. And at AE, I'm known for being that social justice freak. And one of the best compliments I've ever had was the kind of guy that, one of the guys that really didn't get it for a long time said, "You're the only one that can teach me about this social justice stuff." And it's because I have compassion for the conditioning. Like the conditioning of people that are the oppressor is horrible. Like if you look at my dad's like a poster child, he's just a hot mess, and he has every emotional, physical ailment you can have because he was a sensitive man born into a white body and taught oppression his whole life and never knew how to deal with it. And so, you know, to me, it's like we've got to bring compassion to the whole picture, or we're not going to be effective at getting these people with privilege, including us, to figure things out. Because I know, at least when I'm being called out on my stuff, whether it's me calling me out or others, if I don't bring compassion to it, I'm less effective. Oh,
Marilyn, I
okay.
just want to make a note. It is 5 o'clock now, and some people are probably having to step off of the webinar. We can definitely keep going with Q&A, but just want to say thanks to those folks who are here that do need to step off at this time. Anybody else interested in asking some more questions and having some more dialogue, you're welcome to stick around. And like I said earlier, we will send out a link to a recording of this webinar within the next few days.
So I want to say thank you, thank you, thank you. You're my superstar. You're all my superstars. I normally have groups do superstar, but we don't have time. So thank you for your work. I value you immensely. So for those who can stay on, let's see, how do you follow up to a situation where you have provided info with compassion, but the person is still defensive and feels threatened? Oh, yeah, honey. That's what it's going to be like most of the time. You have to develop courageous compassion, which has a lot of patience, because we have gotten to such a divisive, snarky, stuck place, and our amygdalas have gone off. We have limbic brain stuff going on. We've got toxicities in our system because we eat crappy food. We're a mess. And so we have to have a lot of patience and compassion for allowing people to move ahead. And so sometimes all you can do is to continue to love and respect that person, even though they're being a jerk, and even communicate that. Because, that will shock some people, like, especially if they're being snarky, going, you know what, you're being snarky. I don't appreciate how you're behaving, but you know what? I care about you as a human being, and I respect you as a human being. That's transformational, because, be the change. Bring the love, bring the respect, bring the acceptance, bring everything that you want to cause in the world to the hate, to the fear, to all that we don't want to be in the world. And to me, that's what works. And it's a daunting and patience requiring activity. So while I'm waiting for to see if there's any more questions, I do want to say one more thing, like overarching thing to say, is that, I've been exposed to so many different worldviews and ways of being that I would strongly encourage you to choose a worldview and a way of life that is empowering to your best self. Not necessarily your lower self, but your best self. And don't need to be right or wrong about things anymore. That need to be right or wrong is keeping us stuck in the divisiveness. Not being as helpful as it seems.
Thanks so much, Marilyn. I don't see any other questions coming in, so we'll go ahead and wrap things up. Just want to say really, really important information that you're putting out there. The thought for me is that being compassionate and teaching compassion is just it's not a state of being, or in addition to being a state of being, it's a skill that you can practice and develop, especially as an educator, because you have the opportunity all the time working with different groups of people to really, really step up, to be a good educator. In a lot of the settings that we work in is to be a good person. So thanks for role modeling that and for teaching us a little bit about that. We'll see you at AEE in Montreal this year.
Yes, I'm going to be there. Woo-hoo, can't wait.
and hopefully some of you all attending the webinar will be there as well. Stay tuned for a follow-up email where you'll get a link to a lot of these resources that Marilyn's been talking about, and then a few days from now, a link to the recording as well. So thanks everybody for coming. Thanks again, Marilyn.
Thanks so much, everybody. Take care.